Welcome. Today we're going to talk about content security policy. This is a very important concept when learning web development, when working with JavaScript, browsers, APIs. Why I put let's say a script and it's not loading on my website. What are the security measures that browsers put inside my website? All of these concepts are very important. So today we're going to talk about content security policy. The core idea of content security policy is that, also known as CSP, is a set of browser rules that define which sources are allowed to provide scripts, styles, images, fonts, frame, and network connections. By the end of this lesson, of this video, you should be able to explain what a CSP does and why it matters. How do you find CSP on browsers and on websites? And read common directives. You can always look them up if you don't know something. So what does CSP really solve? When we have a website, it actually loads many resources from very different locations. It can load JavaScript files, it can load CSS style sheets, it can load images and fonts, analytics and advertising platforms, payment providers, booking systems, or embedded content such as videos and iframes. So a website will load a lot of different files, and we need to manage that in a secure way. So before loading or executing a resource, what SCP does is it checks whether this source is actually allowed to load. Okay, so this creates an additional layer of protection against attacks such as cross-site scripting. We will talk about those attacks in another video. So first question is, where do you find a content security policy on a website? The option A, it's on the HTTP response header. For those of you who are still getting to know what is an HTTP response header, it is basically a piece of metadata. It's just a small piece of data that is server hosting the website that we are requesting from our local computer. That piece of metadata is being sent in its own response. Okay. So this could be a header on the header. So it could look like this: content security policy, default source, self, script source, self. So what does that mean? Just very brief. We're going to talk about all of these combinations, but it's important to understand this. It means that you can only load, scripts. In this case, for example, script source, you can only load JavaScript code that is coming from its own origin. So it's coming from itself, from its own website, basically, from the hosting, from the servers, from the IP that has that website. Okay. This is actually the preferred method, and we're going to talk now why. The option B, it's putting this CSP in the meta element. So the meta element, it's just a HTML tag that is placed normally in the header part of the website. So it's really at the beginning of when you're creating a website. That's where you put the meta element. This meta element, you might have this kind of attribute. So HTTP equiv, so content security policy, and the content. So what's the policy saying? This is exactly the same. When will the browser apply these rules? This is also very relevant. When as a local computer, when I'm requesting a website to a server, I will, like, the browser needs to parse the whole page. When it parses the page, what it does is that it will reach this tag, and only when it reaches this tag, only when it starts reading that, it will apply that rule. So this is why I put this warning here. A meta-based content security policy only affects content processed after the browser encounters it. So if there is some code that for some reason you are putting it above this meta tag on your HTML page, it might execute it. Okay. Some directives, including frame ancestors. So what is a frame ancestors? Frame ancestors is a policy that you're saying, I allow or not allow. Basically, you can say you can specify which websites can embed your own website into them. It's a bit confusing, but we're going to talk about that later. We're going to talk about 3 real examples. First is, I'm from Barcelona. I love Sagrada Familia. This is really important place for me. So I'm going to talk about Sagrada Familia. Basically, in their website, there's no content policy found. So what is a learning point here? Some websites do not have an explicit content security policy. A website might use other security headers without having an CSP. Okay, so that's number 1. This is the main takeaway. Not all websites have an explicit content security policy. They may use other ways to make their website more secure. Okay. Then we talk about this Louvre Collections. Okay, this is a website in French, and where is the content security policy in this website? It's on the HTTP response header. What is the main learning point? That also you can have this content security policy on the HTTP header. That's basically it. And then there is also this website. It's a whiskey website that I found, and it has this HTML. It has a meta element in. So basically, the content security policy, it's inside its own meta element. Let's go to each of these websites and try to find what is there. Okay. So I have this website. So first of all, we're gonna go to Sagrada Familia. I'm gonna do right click, inspect. And then here I have all the elements of the page. Okay, maybe I'm not like really savvy with all of this. But what matters is that we're going to look at different things. So here we find the head. And we said that if we have 2 options, right? To have a content security policy on the meta tag. Here there's a meta tag. I don't really find anything here. And if I do a search, I also don't find anything. So I'm not finding any content security policy on the elements of the HTML. The other way that we can think about this is through the network. So if we actually clear the network and we do Command R, we're going to be able to load all the network requests. And then if we click here, we're going to talk about request URL, request method, and then response headers. You see this part? It's called response header. This is what the server that hosts the Sagrada Familia website, it's saying as a metadata. We have accept ranges, age, cache control, etc. We have some kind of information about security, but we don't really have content security policy in this website. So that's case number 1. We are going to Sagrada Familia. We don't find any content security policy. Fine. Let's go to this example here. We're going to go here and we're going to inspect the page. And then in this page, we're going to check first the network because that's the easiest one. We're going to clear this and I'm going to do Command R to refresh again the page. I'm disabling the cache, so that's important as well. It means we'll reload everything. And this is the actual document. And look at this. On the response headers, we have a content security policy. This is cool, right? So we have a style source. It says unsafe-inline. And then there's like a lot of websites here listed. So what do you think style source means? It's talking about CSS. Style, CSS, they're related, right? This is script source. What do you think script source means? It's JavaScript. So it's saying you can do unsafe-inline. So that means this HTML can load and can actually fire JavaScript inline code inside the HTML. This could be a potential risk, right? That we can analyze. And then you can see also this kind of websites. This looks like Cloudflare, Google Analytics. So you can actually fire code that is fetching So you're fetching JavaScript code that is hosted in Google Analytics. That's for your analytics, your fonts, SSL, YouTube as well, more fonts, Google APIs. So you see that you have a lot of stuff. And hey, here we have another one. It's also called base-uri. This is also, we're going to look at this one. Okay, so we see that this content security policy, it's on the response headers. And this is controlling what are the websites allowed, what is the extent on which resources from other origins can be loaded. Meaning other origins means it's not coming from this origin. We're going to talk about origin in another video, but just think of origin as sharing the same domain, the same port, and the same protocol. That's an origin, the combination of those three. And here we're going to talk about visit, Roe Co whiskey. So let's load that as well. And this is kind of like a shop. And we're going to do also inspect. And if we go to network, we're going to clear the network, just Command R. And then here, response headers. As you can see, I don't see any content security policy in these response headers. I don't see any. So we're going to go to elements and we're going to go to head and look at this one. Content security policy. I can also do Command F, content security, and then it's kind of finding it for me. It's like a Control F, right? So, fine. So here's my content security policy and here's the content. So everything that is above this meta tag is actually going to be loaded without taking into consideration this content security policy. But you can see here, default source self, so you can load any scripts that come from its own origin. The style, you can load CSS code that comes from itself, from its own origin, also from this URL. You can also do unsafe-inline. That means you can load CSS on the actual HTML. And Google API. So you see you have a lot of websites. So you have three ways that content security policy could be there. Let's go back to the notes. So case one, let's just go very, very quickly. Sagrada Familia, we didn't find any content security policy. We could also do it on the console. We can put this JavaScript code and we will find this. It's empty, but still we found other security related headers. We're going to talk about these ones in another video. So these headers could still help to create some security, but they do not replace a content security policy. That's important to know. Okay. And the case two is Louvre Collections. This is the French website I was showing you. And this was the policy except the style, the script, object, and base-uri. So what do these four mean? So style controls CSS. Styles may load from the listed domains. So I could load this kind of from this website. I could load styles. I could load CSS scripts from these websites. Unsafe-inline also permits CSS written directly inside the HTML. Script source, JavaScript sources. Scripts may load from the listed domains. So what are the domains that allow me to load JavaScript? I can load from this one, from Google Analytics, from YouTube. All right. Object source. So in the past, JavaScript objects were used, and nowadays they are blocked because they're not considered very secure anymore. So now it's none. So it means do not load any object, embed, or applet. Okay. And then this base-uri, the HTML base element. This is an HTML element that basically says all the files starting from this path can be loaded from a path. So let's imagine you are working on a repository and you are working on, let's say, a folder called assets. If you put that path as your base element called like blah, 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 and then assets, that's exactly what you can, all the other files, you can do like relative referencing. In this case, it says self. Only a base URL may only point to the Louvre Collections origin. That's very clear and also very important. So these are called relative links. So for example, if I'm loading an image on my website and I put it like images/photo.jpg, that means that this will resolve as this, because this is my base, right? This is my base website. I'm loading this image. This is a relative path. So you will use this one, append the image into here, and resolve this as this one. An attacker who could inject a malicious base element might redirect links or form destinations to another origin. The rule prevents that. So yeah, this rule is actually protecting from any kind of any attacker that could inject this kind of base element in JavaScript. Then we have this case 3. It's this whiskey website, Roe Co. And this one has this, it's content security policy directly inside the HTML, inside the head. So we have HTTP equivalent content security policy content. The browser reads the content attribute and then applies rules to the rest of the document. Okay, so this is a simplified policy. Default source, font source, connect source, script source, style source, image source. So you have so many sources. Let's talk about them. Default source, this is the fallback rule. When a more specific directive is missing, the resource may only come from the page own origin. So that's kind of like protecting in case I miss something, use this default source. Font source controls where fonts may load from. In this case, I could load fonts from these domains, from these origins. Selves allows fonts from the same origin. Static.com allows fonts from Google hosted static resources. Data allows a font to be encoded directly inside CSS. So the browser does not need to download it from a separate URL. So you can actually put the data URL here. Then we have a connection source. It's controls connections initiated by JavaScript. So you can have fetch request, HTML, HTTP request, analytics, beacons, WebSocket connections. So these are different kind of connections that you can do through JavaScript to preload elements. And in this case, we can connect to SaferPay, to Google Analytics, OneTrust. So this is our like cookies. This is analytics services. This is a payment method. And this is everything that is coming from its own origin. So normally we always want to allow our own origin to load things, right? Because it's coming from our own web server or our own CDN. But then here we have trusted sources. So you can connect to these ones. So we have a lot of different components, scripts, sources. This is a broader JavaScript policy. And here we have two interesting policies. One is unsafe-inline, which allows JavaScript to be written directly inside HTML. This is not really recommended on modern browsers, modern web apps, but still older websites may use that because it's going to be a lot of work to refactor everything. And then we have unsafe evaluation, permits strings to be converted into executable JavaScript. All right, so now we have these permissions. We also have the style source. So this is basically where the CSS can load. It can load CSS from its own origin, but it also can load unsafe-inline. So inside the HTML from Google APIs. So I think you are understanding everything like clearly, right? So basically these are policies and you are telling exactly what's allowed, what's not. So let's think about this. So practical examples. Can you actually fetch a JavaScript connection? Yes, because you can connect to this URL, this origin, because it's allowed on the connect source. The second practical example, can you actually fetch this payment safer pay process URL? Can you actually talk to this load connection to this origin into your website? Yes, because safer pay appears in connect. Can you load attacker.example /steal/.js? No, it's blocked because it's not included in the script allowed list. So this is exactly why we do this, because we want to block websites that we don't trust. We only want to whitelist to allow certain websites to be uncertain, like to load their own scripts, their own connection, their own images, everything, all the files that could be there, right? We only want specific websites to load things in our website. Injected inline JavaScript. Yeah, actually we have unsafe-inline in this website. So you could inject JavaScript here. How do we know whether this is safe or not? In general, this is not a good practice, but if you have it, you must check that there's no way that JavaScript will be reflected back to the user or back to the backend. That's another video for that, but this is a very important concept to understand, is that if you allow inline JavaScript in your HTML, you must always parse it correctly. So now let's do a small assessment. How strong is this Roe Co policies? Recall that we have, this is the whole policy. This is on the meta. It's on the HTML. So how strong is this policy? Well, you have explicit rules for scripts, styles, images. It can block resources from completely unknown domains. Default source has a good fallback. That's good. What is the weakness? So here, the allow list contains many third-party domains. Yeah, it's many. Do you really need all these origins and domains to be loading into your website? Do you really need that? Unsafe-inline permits inline JavaScript. As I said, is not a good practice. Unsafe-eval. So this is like also loading functions. Permits string-based code execution. Yeah. So you can have some strings that are being loaded on your website, and that's also not a good practice. Object source is not set to none. So a good practice is to not allow any objects to be loaded. A meta-based policy cannot enforce frame ancestors. So this is basically what content security policy does. I hope this was a comprehensive understanding for you. And if you have any questions, let me know. If you think there's something to clarify or I was not clear, let me know. I'm also learning while teaching. So thank you so much.